Sorry, I didn't realize it was 8:03. I was like, try to give people time. But as everyone gets on, I wanted to say thanks for joining. Hey, everyone. It's like good to see so many faces. I've been in my house with my family, so it's good to see everybody else. Thanks so much for attending hashtags Healing and Hope, an interactive discussion about being Black in America right now and what that looks like. My hopes is that you leave today feeling educated, feeling hopeful, and feeling like you've gotten some type of healing. I know there's so much going on. The Ahmaud Arbery case started today. George Floyd's memorial service was today. I mean, you see the videos of, Ayanna Dior, and it's just a lot going on. So I thank you all for being in this space, for creating this space and being here. So before we get started, I think it's important that we have to read the room. And so when I say read the room, I mean really understand the emotions and thoughts of the people in this room, and in this case, like in this space that we are creating. So everyone is muted, hopefully, or if you are not muted, if you can mute yourself throughout the session. Okay, I just want to make sure everyone is muted. It would happen when I'm trying to tell everybody to mute themselves, right? Mute yourselves throughout, and we will have time at the end to have a Q&A discussion about, the thoughts of the panelists and the guests. If you have questions, comments, type them in the chat box. I will be making sure to take a look at the chat box. This webinar will be recorded. I know you always have that one person in webinars who always asks about 5 times, is this webinar going to be recorded? It will be recorded, and I will send it to you all that registered, so I'll send it in the email. Also, we're live tweeting. So if you're on Twitter, I'm not good at Twitter, but we have Kalia from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She will be live tweeting using the hashtag Healing and Hope to share information, to share if you have those yes moments, like those yes, or you have anything, please put that on Twitter. And if you need anything throughout this webinar, or if you have questions at the end, make sure to use my email right there. So moving forward, I think on top of like setting the ground rules, we have to set our space, and like this is our space. We created this space for us to talk, to be respectful. I think I left that out in the before at the other slide, but be respectful of everyone on the call. A lot of people just want to get information, want to figure out, what's going on, what this looks like, but to set our space. So, setting the stage, setting our space, and what brought us all here today. So systemic racism, or institutional racism, or structural racism, whatever you would like to call it, are forms of oppression and privilege that affects almost every aspect of our society, to our laws, institutions, schools, hospitals, justice system, media, everything. I think I saw something on Instagram about microaggressions and how people feel like people haven't even been talking about this in their workplace. So, all of this is a part of that. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and many other Black lives have been inhumanely murdered. And it has been a result of systemic racism that persists in our country. What we have to be clear on is that racism doesn't stop at police brutality, and neither does reform and action. So no matter how we feel, we must prioritize the equity in the midst of police brutality, racism, and let's not forget COVID-19. I know the news before, it was everything about COVID, and now it's the opposite. But I was trying to think of an analogy to really figure out what we were going through and how I felt. And I feel like we are literally living in a versus battle that's been sponsored by America. So we have police brutality and racism on this side, and then we have COVID-19, and we're just watching. We're keeping score. We are all over the place. And so I think in the midst of all of this, we have to remind ourselves, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on, but what we always seem to always have, and that's Black joy, and that's always creating these in these spaces that we are in. And so I say this to say we are a community, we have a community, and we have to pour into our community. And today, our community is these 4 individuals right here. They are, scholars, they are activists, they are physicians, they are politicians, researchers, nonprofit founders, professors, activists, respected professionals in their field, all from South Carolina and all University of South Carolina graduates. Just had to throw that out there. But most importantly, they have always been advocates for Black people, and that's period. Like, that's just what they've always been about. So from having written many published scholarly articles dating since 2016 with titles like The Pain and the Wounds, a call for critical race, English education in the wake of racial violence, or an article titled Using Our Voices, Losing Our Bodies, Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, and the Spirit of Murders of Black Male Professors in the Academy, to an individual who's been working and practicing medicine for about 3 years, specifically working in OBGYN and with Black women in Chicago, a beautiful city, but let's be clear, as an example of this country's urban-rural divide that has a long history of racist policies that have led to this racially divided city, to an activist who has many passions, but has drafted, passed, implemented many anti-discrimination legislation in New York City, including, but not limited to, New York City Ban the Box Law, anti-credit discrimination law, anti-discrimination against victims of domestic violence, and the anti-caregiver discrimination law, to a politician who is actually up for re-election next week for his seat for the South Carolina House District, and who also attended a peaceful protest in Charleston this weekend, when usually our political figures don't go on the front lines of protests. One person made a comment on IG that stated about this person: we need leaders who aren't afraid to lead by example and aren't afraid to share uncomfortable truths. Thank you for being unafraid to be that voice. So today, you guys, this is our community. This is who we are going to talk to. This is who we are going to try to draw some inspiration and healing and hope from. And so I just want to open it with saying, hey, y'all, hey, how are the panelists?
Good evening.
Good, we're good.
Dr. Constance Adams is coming on. She literally just left surgery. So she will be jumping on. And so we will look forward to her. But before we get started with the first question, can I get everybody to at least chat in the box, one word to describe how they feel right now? And this will be a way how we read the room. So once you figure out what that word is, read the comments or read what's in the chat box. And that's a way to read the room. So while everyone's doing that, we are going to get started with our community, and we are going to answer that first question. And that first question is, in this moment, what does it mean to be Black? With everything going on, what does it mean to you? Who are you in this space? And so I think maybe started off with Representative Pendarvis, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Good evening, Shell. Thank you for the opportunity to share with your group. I see we got a number of folks on, 72 participants. So I'm hoping that we can have a robust discussion where we can engage each other in a fruitful conversation and learn something from it. What does it mean to be Black in this moment? I think for me, it's to be cognizant of the many struggles that we go through on a day-to-day basis, from the workplace to being out in our communities, in education, in our homes, and to understand that as Black men and women, we have a larger responsibility in this society to understand our role and to figure out what that role is. And so what the past few days has taught me is showed me that we still as a country have not wrestled with or accepted the sins of our past. If you look at historically where we've come from, we've not done a good job of really bringing to the forefront the struggles, the frustrations, and the overall plight of African Americans. And I think that's what you have seen kind of boil up into the many demonstrations and protests over the weekend. And so to be back right now is to be fully aware on both sides, to understand that in many respects, we still to see policies, we still see laws, we still see things that are enacted that continue to marginalize us, that continue to disenfranchise us, that continue to push us to the fringes. But it's also to be resilient, to be optimistic, because if you know our plight. We're a hopeful people. We're a people that's overcome lots of tragedy, struggle. And so knowing that it's going to be up to us to kind of move forward and what that looks like. And so a lot of it is just wrestling with the reality of today, a reality that we all know is true and has existed for some time, but it's taken this for America to realize it, but also looking at a path forward, understanding that there's a lot of work to be done. Our ancestors laid the groundwork for us to be where we're at now. And so it's up to us to carry that mantle forward and recognize that we have so much more to offer to the conversation, to the advancement of our people, which ultimately will be the advancement of the overall American cause.
Yes, Representative Pendarvis. It's sometimes weird calling you that. Constance is on. Hey, Constance, Dr. Adams.
Hey.
How are you? Can you kind of tackle, so you just left surgery in Chicago, you got home really quick, but can you possibly answer this question of what it means right now for you to be a Black physician in Chicago and just a Black woman right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think first and foremost is being Black right now is being proud, right? Having such a sense of pride. Every day that I walk into a patient's room, and it's especially the Black patients, you walk in and you introduce yourself as, I'm Dr. Adams. You can either see a sigh of relief, like you can actually visibly see people breathe, right? Or you can just see like pride in their eyes. Sometimes, there's always going to be the 70-year-old, baby, I'm proud of you, and that's something I felt even in medical school, because I went to medical school in Charleston, South Carolina, and in the same hospital where you would have like a lot of our cafeteria workers and a lot of the sanitation workers were Black people, but they would be so proud of you. They would pull you aside, and every single moment they had an opportunity to tell you they supported you and they loved you and how proud they were of you. They always did it, and it's the same thing up here. And I think it's just profound to me that even in the setting of everything happening right now, especially right now, that we come from a proud people. Like, people come together and you just uplift each other, and you continue to have just a sense of community pride, right? So that's one part of it. Mm-hmm. Being a Black physician right now, I'm tired. I am. It's funny. I was looking at what the chat comments were saying, and they're tired, fatigue, that came up a lot, and not just from a physical standpoint, but just emotionally, right? Like, we're going to dive into the COVID later on, but COVID is very much happening right now. We're very much in a position where you see how Black people are disproportionately affected. I have dealt with some personal losses from COVID right now, just in pretty much because my family is just like a lot of the families in the United States right now, people who don't have access to health and who have really suffered from it, and seen my patients suffer from it. And then with the recent events with George Floyd, not even recent, because honestly, this has been happening for years. And I'll get into it later on about how I think it's ironic that people who are now speaking up about George Floyd managed to ignore all of the other deaths that we've had. But feeling like you're in a position where people want to now talk about these issues when you're at work. Like, I still have this Black patient who didn't get the care that she should have gotten, whose symptoms were ignored, whose pain was ignored. But you want to sit here and talk to me about this right now. You want to talk to me about how you're upset about downtown being boarded up right now, but you don't want to talk to me about what it must feel like to know that at the end of the day, I could have the same kind of outcomes as Brianna did.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I got a little bit off topic, but that's kind of just how I'm feeling. I'm fresh off, so I didn't have time to think.
No, I appreciate it, but it's the same thing. I think we all could have been these hashtags. I always think of like Sandra Bland and how, she was very vocal. She was very nonchalant. Sometimes when cops come to my car, I'm still very nonchalant. I'm like, what did you pull me over for? They ask like, what did you pull? Do you know why I pulled you over? I'm like, nope, I don't know. That's just like, I'm nonchalant because I really don't know. And so I'm just going to give you that energy. And so I could have been a Sandra Bland, she was that aggressive, angry Black woman. And, we all sometimes have that angry Black woman. And so I think we all could have been hashtags, and that's the fear in a lot of it, and what that means to be Black, regardless of, you know, not even to get into this, but the skin tone of you being Black. I think just in general, being a Black person.
Yeah.
Ooh, girl, you got me to talking. I was just gonna let y'all talk.
Sorry.
We are going to, let's go with Alicia Brown. Let's go with Miss Brown. There we go.
Yeah, there we go. Y'all have to work with me. I'm like a 70-year-old when it comes to anything technology related. But first of all, thank you, Showcasia, for putting this together and creating this space for so many people to be able to join in on a conversation that's certainly much needed right now. How do I feel being Black right now? I mean, how I've always felt, you know. I'm editing a book right now, and in the book, I talk about how I learned at a very young age that race matters, and how that has shaped who I am, and you know, what I've spent the majority of my adulthood doing. And so when you pose the question, how do I feel? I feel resilient, and I feel ready to fight, because as Constance mentioned, none of this is new. It's just not. And you know, the good thing about today is that we do have social media, and we do have not video phones with video recording and different things like that. And so that's provided more access to the masses to be able to really not only visualize, but feel, right? To be able to empathize and embrace what's really going on in understanding that there are so many, and it's not just with police brutality, but there's so many disproportionalities that affect the Black community. And so, you know, I spend my time working on these issues every day, and that's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because unfortunately, when I saw the video of George Floyd, I wasn't shocked. When I heard about Breonna, I wasn't shocked. Nothing shocks me. Nothing surprises me. Racism is very real, and it's been a part of this country since this country was founded. And so I'm not shocked, but I do know that as Black folks, we are incredibly resilient, and I know we will continue to be resilient, and we will continue to fight. And I'm happy that further on in this conversation, we'll talk about things that we can be doing, each and every last one of us, to help us sort of bounce back from an incredibly emotionally draining time.
Yes. And then I'm going to kick it off to Dr. J, as he calls himself.
Well, first, I want to say much love to you for creating such a dynamic and dope and Black space. And so when I think about your question, what does it mean to be Black right now? I think about what Black is and what Black ain't. I'm meditating on Blackness. A good friend of mine talks about how Blackness is revolutionary. And she says that you can't have, you know, revolution without love, and you can't have love without Blackness. So I'm always thinking about what does it mean to love on my Blackness in a time of ongoing racial chaos, systemic oppression, and anti-Black racism and violence. Like, what does it mean to love our Blackness back to life in the midst of all of this death? And so I think about that. And so I have a meditation that is called Black Is and Black Ain't. And so I want to read a little bit of that meditation and focus on like Blackness. So it reads, Black is love, Black is beautiful, Black is joy, Black is fierce, Black is aggressive, but also peaceful. Black ain't evil, Black ain't tortured, Black ain't soulless, Black is soul, Black is unapologetic, Black is free, Black ain't afraid, Black ain't monolithic, Black is complex, but it's also simple. Black is light, but Black is also dark. Black is resilient, Black is strength, Black is smooth, Black is dope, Black is magical. And so I think the main thing we need to take away is that there's so much beauty and dopeness in Blackness. There's so much beauty and dopeness in being Black. And knowing that Black is more than just, you know, skin hues. It's intersectional, right? It's the race, it's the gender, it's language, it's class, it's spirituality, it's religion. Blackness is also, you know, Black women, girls, trans folks, boys and men. And so I think Blackness is so much, it encompasses so much. And so when I think about Blackness, it's also an act of self-care, collective care, and resistance. So I know that my Blackness is a commitment to myself, my humanity, and also those folks who I am in community with. And so a good friend of mine and mentor, Dr. Dave Stovall, he talks about Blackness, and he says, Blackness is a title, but it's also a political understanding of your life in this place. It is an affirmation of what it is that you understand yourself to be and a willingness to fight. I now understand that my Blackness is not only personal, but it's also political. And then I see how the political is personal. So for example, you asked, like, you say, how do we carry our Blackness in certain spaces? So I'm a professor at Michigan State University, and I'm a Black male before I'm a professor, right? My humanity and Blackness, those things come first. Because I'm talking about a space that doesn't love me, that was not created for me, a space that's built on land theft, anti-Black racism, violence, xenophobia, linguistic violence, toxic masculinity, and patriarchy. So I understand that. So I enter that space as a classic Black academic, right? The classy and the ratchet side, but also I bring and talk about the Black experience. Because I understand how the racial violence in the street, it also bleeds into the classroom spaces. So no one's safe in academia, from like elementary, middle school, Black and brown students, high school, Black and brown professors and teachers, right? We all experience that racial violence. And even the symbolic and spiritual violence. When we read books and articles where we don't see people look like us, that actually kills our humanity and spirit. And so I take that Black experience with me in my research, teaching, and service, and it focuses on Black people, Blackness, and Black education.
When we finish with this, can you send me that meditation, the Blackness meditation, so I can share that out? Because that was really good. But to pivot on to the next question, and while I ask you all this question, as well as answer the question and ask the audience that right now, you know, what are ways that you all have been engaging in self-care and keeping yourself whole during this time? And so I always say, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself first. And so to pivot from what all of our panelists have said about how they feel tired, they're exhausted, they're upset, they feel resilient. In this space, I felt last week I was the negative Nancy. Everything I was upset about, I was over it. I mean, to be honest, this wasn't the first time. I still remember Walter Scott getting killed. And so to me, that's all that I could remember. So George Floyd's murder was, you know, it hit me hard and seeing the video, but I had already been there. And I had conversations with my stepdad and my mom, conversations that felt good that I don't ever remember having about race and racism and police brutality. And then me and my mom pivoted into the room and we watched Insecure, and we laughed and we joked and we pinched each other because it was a good episode. So if you haven't watched Insecure, the last season from Sunday, go watch it. But it made me just realize that, like, that's my self-care. My self-care is like my laughter, with my friends and my family. And that brought me back to the space to want to create this. I was not going to do anything. I just didn't want to be a part of it at all. And so after that Sunday, I reached out to two of the folks, our community, and then the next morning it was too late, so I reached out to everybody else, and we made this happen because we wanted to have this space to talk. And so while people are putting in the chat, you know, how they have been staying engaged, I'm gonna pin it off. I'm gonna start with the ladies this time. I'm gonna pin it right back to Alicia Brown. If you can tell us about, you know, just ways that you've just been engaging in self-care, even if it's something real small, quick, but just things that you've been doing.
Am I off of mute now?
Yep.
Oh. Self-care. I'm a little different when it comes to these issues, because my self-care comes from helping others. And so, you know, showing up for my clients and writing a brief that's better than any other brief I've ever written, or being out in the community as the ED for the struggle, and helping our Black seniors keep their homes in a time when gentrification is rampant and, you know, folks are ready to push them out of their homes. And so, you know, anyone who knows me knows I like to stay busy, and that's, you know, quite frankly, what grounds me. And I would say, outside of work and outside of the constant fight with my law practice, but then also the constant fight through the nonprofit, I'm fairly normal, like you said, hanging out with my friends. They're here right now listening.
Hey, friends.
You know, hey, friends. Listening to music. I love music, the dancing, and, you know, just trying to mentally disconnect from things that are happening throughout the country, but also from the very intimate relationship I have with things that are happening right here, right? And the things that are happening that cause me to have to file the discrimination lawsuits, the Title VII's, the Fourth Amendment violation, excessive force lawsuits that I file. So between just continuing to fight and continuing to be resilient and, you know, hanging out with friends, that's how I have stayed grounded and how I continue to cope with what it means to be Black in America.
In America right now, yeah. Dr. Adams?
Yeah, so one of the things I realized a while ago, even before now, is that mental health is like, you have to have a long-term commitment to your own mental health, right? And one of the things I started doing about 2 years ago, a girlfriend of mine recommended therapy for Black girls. And Therapy for Black girls, they actually have a resource on there for you to find yourself a Black therapist. And with the daily traumas of my job, like I am in a specialty, well, I think all doctors are, but particularly my specialty, I'm with women in the worst days of their lives and the best days of their lives, right? I'm with them when they're at their highest and they're at their lowest. And it is difficult to just leave it all at work, right? Like I used to pride myself on being somebody who could do a really good job of compartmentalizing, but I realized with trauma after trauma after trauma, it starts to take a toll on you. And you can no longer, like I felt like I could no longer really do my job and do a good job and actually be the best advocate for my patients when I wasn't taking care of myself. And so because of Therapy for Black girls, I found myself an amazing therapist. And she's continued to be my girl. Yeah. That's my dog. And so, you know, I every 2 weeks I go to therapy. Well, virtual therapy now because #COVID. And I communicate with her. I talk to her about my highs, my lows, difficulties I may have with my identity. One of the conversations that we had recently was just talking about my frustrations with being in a position where I feel like I'm having to be the voice of all Black people in my job right now, and how much of a burden that is on me, and how that's not something that I have to really kind of play into. The other thing is that I have a really excellent community up here. I have a community of friends, I have a community of colleagues, and in particular with the colleagues, when you have people who are going through the similar experiences as you, as Black women, having people to sit there and talk to, like in my particular program, there's about, we do excellent with diversity, and there's about maybe 9 Black women in my program in total out of about 47. And we sit and we communicate and we talk about frustrations that we may have, and we support each other. And that's been fantastic. And then one of the things that both of you guys just talked about was just laughing, like finding times to take time and laugh and be okay with laughing, be okay with feeling happy. Because I think that's something else that happens for us, is that you feel guilty for feeling happy when there is someone who can no longer feel that at all, and whose family right now is not able to feel that. And I think accepting the fact that it's okay for you to be happy in a time like this, and it's okay for you to find little pockets of joy, because you still have to be able to take care of yourself, and you can't ignore your joy.
Yeah. I agree. Dr. J, really quick, can you jump in? And then we're going to ended this question with Representative Pendarvis.
Yeah, so when I think about self-care, I think about Lauryn Hill's That Thing, and how she say, how are you going to win when you ain't right within?
Okay.
I think you have to look within first. You have to talk to self first, and you have to know yourself. And so I think so often whiteness, right, and white supremacy tell us that you can't experience feelings and emotions, that it's linear. Within Black culture, it's okay to feel, right? It's okay to have those feelings, those emotions. Because we learn, how can I pour love into other folks if I don't love on myself? And not the type of love that how you may love, you know, your partner or your spouse, not the type of mushy love, but like that agape love, right? The unconditional love, where I don't know you and I still love you. a love that is radical, that is grounded in resistance, a love that is action-oriented. So I think about, you know, love in conjunction with self-care and being at the seat of self and at the seat of consciousness, because everything we need is at the seat of self and at the seat of consciousness, that joy, love, and peace. And I want to end it on basically talking about like Black joy. And so reading another part of my book, the last part about like how, you know, like Black joy and what does it mean to have joy, even in the midst of this racial chaos, even in the midst of the storm. And so I say we have to be overcommitted to the spaces that give us and bring us Black joy. In her 2019 live album titled Homecoming, Beyonce reminds the people that Black joy is filled with so much damn swag. Mm-hmm. She asserts, and the amount of swag is just limitless. Like the things that these young people can do with their bodies, and the music they can play, and the drum rolls, and their haircuts, and the bodies, and it's just not right. It's just so much damn swag. And so, for instance, Black graduates swag surfing during high school and college graduations are the epitome and embodiment of Black joy. When I say Black joy, I'm referring to the type of joy that originates in resistance, joy that is discovered in making a way out of no way, joy that is uncovered when you know how to love yourself and others. Black joy is when Black folks actively work to stay human through showcasing an unapologetic love for Blackness, Black beauty, and Black life. Black joy is the prototype for creating a better tomorrow. We can't demand the world we want to see without Black joy. And we can't embrace Black joy without embodying the radical imagination. And I think about, you know, even on the media right now, even through all this pain, we still have so much Black joy. I think about, you know, a meme I saw a few weeks ago, actually was a video, actually last week. It was a Black girl twerking in front of the cops at the protest. but that actually activated, right? That joy is connected to her activism. Even in that pain, she still had joy. The guy really rocking on the police car, that's still connected to his Black joy. And that activism, those things are all intangible with one another. The Black folks doing the electric slide at the protest, that is still that Black joy. And I think that it shows us how even through the struggle, we still have that beauty, we're still thriving. We're thriving in the past, we're thriving right now in the present, and we're gonna thrive in the future. So I'll end it there.
I feel so unprepared.
You can never be unprepared. He's a professor. He's an educator. This is stuff from his book. Representative Pendarvis, if you could end up with some real quick, and then we can go on into the third question. And the third question is really, you know, I know the meat of why everyone's here is like, what can we do? I mean, it's a lot of rhetoric online. There's a lot of, you know, what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing and how to participate in this and how to participate in that. And so I really thought you four would be the best people to talk to about what I should be doing, what everybody else should be doing, and what they should be engaging in to be effective. You know, everybody wants to be a part of it, but are you really being effective in the way that you are, you know, doing your part, as to say. And so I wanted to maybe Representative Pendarvis, if you can, you know, talk about some of your self-care and then jump right into like, you know, what are we supposed to be doing? Because we need help.
Yeah, perfect. And I think that's the great opportunity to segue. In a moment of honesty, transparency, and truth, honestly, I have not done much of self-care. Mm-hmm. That's the reality. So much of my life and what I do is front-facing. And like what Alicia says, I get a lot of satisfaction out of being in a position of influence and being able to help people. But the truth is I haven't been okay the last week. It's rocked me to my core, like unlike anything else that I've experienced. One is the cumulative effect of us seeing so many Black bodies gunned down at the hands of officers, but also it's representative of a deep-seated, rooted issue within our community that we have to understand and fundamentally do something about. And so being in a position like I am, I feel a greater responsibility. A lot of that is self-imposed unfairly, I recognize, and I shoulder a lot of that, but I know a lot of that also comes with the territory and the role of me being in office. But I haven't been okay. Generally speaking, when it comes to self-care, obviously I have a new 6-week-old son. I mean, that takes my mind away from a lot of things. And so being able to spend time with him and my wife is a great opportunity to get away. And that's something that I'll do next week after the election. But I haven't been okay. And I was telling a colleague of mine, you know, in positions like hours where so much is required and so much is expected, we have to continuously be on the front lines. We have to make sure that we're doing everything we can, because people look to you to implement policy. People look to you to implement change. People look to you to understand issues and to be able to articulate in a way that's meaningful for them, and giving them the encouragement and the empowerment to go forward in their communities to do the work. And that comes with a cost. It's what I signed up when I signed my name on the dotted line to run for office. And it's one that I embrace, but it's one that comes at a cost when you don't take care of yourself. And so that's something that I'm working through. I'll be very frank. I don't purport to be perfect. I certainly am one that in tune with my vulnerabilities. And one of that is I haven't done much of self-care lately. It's something that my wife and I talk about quite often, and that's something that I'm looking towards. But it's because so much that's going on in our society, and I'm constantly trying to figure out what my role is and how I can better ensure that we, one, don't see the injustices that we see in our street, but also be an arbiter of change, be the person that can lift us up, can drive our communities forward, and to implement the kind of change on the ground level that we need to see. And so, segueing into your question about what we can do, I've been thinking about that a lot. And I recently wrote an op-ed in our newspaper here in Charleston, which I know you're familiar with, the Post and Courier. And it talked about that very thing, because if there's anything that George Floyd's death, his murder, taught me, it's one that we were already at a tipping point in this country. People asked me this week, were you surprised that they rioted in downtown Charleston? Were you surprised they rioted in Columbia? Were you surprised at the riots across the country? Absolutely not. In fact, I was surprised they didn't do it after Walter Scott and the Emanuel 9 in 2015.
Yeah.
The issue is we reached a tipping point. It's the cumulative effect that we continue to see this, but also people are recognizing doesn't matter, that your life doesn't matter in this community. And then we're also, by our law enforcement arm, saying your life doesn't matter in these streets. Then what else do you expect? You get to a point where people are fed up, they're frustrated, they're hopeless, and they're living in this despair, particularly the people that I talk to on a day-to-day basis. And so about what we can do is, I'm all about the protests. I'm all about the demonstrations. I was a protester this past Saturday. I felt obligated to be out there. I wanted to hear and feel the frustrations of my brothers and sisters. But like President Obama said yesterday, and he said it eloquently, you know, how do we harness this energy? How do we transfer this energy into something actionable that gets to some kind of change within our communities? That's ultimately what we have to do. And so, you know, anyone who's on the call, I've got a few action items that you can take. You know, these are South Carolina specific, but you can take this across wherever you're at, located in the United States. One, if you look at so much of what led to George Floyd's death, a lot of it has to do with the criminal justice system and the way policing is in this country. And so we've got to, one, demilitarize our police force. We've got to do more to ensure that body cameras are on every officer and every law enforcement arm in this country. We have to do a better job of ensuring that there's more accountability within the police department. I put on my social media today simply some action steps that you can take in order to go about affecting change in your community. I've always been a proponent that the best way to get the kind of change that we need to see is you have to be active and you have to do it in large scale. These protests are good, but let's say we kept that same energy that we saw in Charleston and Columbia this week, and we took that to the State House in Columbia, where I serve. And we showed up 1,000 folks Tuesday through Thursday saying, you know what, until you do something about the injustices in our community, until you do something to ensure that these police forces are held accountable, until you do something to uplift us in a way that's meaningful that you've neglected for years, because this isn't anything new, like Lamar said earlier, then what we have to do, then you'll see the kind of change that's necessary. Then you'll see the kind of change that'll propel us going forward. But people have to know that we care. And so my hope is that if you want to be involved, if you feel like you have a voice, if you feel moved like I've been moved, and you want to do something more, then continue to keep the same energy, you know, and direct it in a way that's to your county council and your city council person, writing that person, calling that person, emailing that person, directing it to your state officials, and going to the state house, wherever you're at, wherever part of the country, and letting your voice be known. I'm telling you, it's important. If anyone understands, and people who talk to me on a consistent basis understands that the things that move, the policies that move, the ones that get the most attention are the ones that have the most attention by the people, the ones that people talk about. And so you have to be vocal in your opposition to so much of the laws that are on the books. You know, I'll give you an example. One of the things that led to Ahmaud Arbery's death is the citizen's arrest statute, you know, where as a citizen who's not trained in law enforcement, I can effectuate arrest, right? Well, we've got that in South Carolina, but you know what's even worse about South Carolina's law? Not only can you arrest that person, but the law says if a life shall be taken. All right. So what we're doing is we're putting that kind of, one, we already got a problem with the training of law enforcement officials anyway. And then two, you're telling me that we're going to compound that by empowering day-to-day citizens without the training to go ahead and do that. And so it can have devastating and deadly consequences. And that's just one example, but it just goes to show you we can't go to sleep at the wheel. We have to pay attention. I want to harp on that, and I want the 97 people that are listening to this to understand we have an opportunity right now. It's as unfortunate and as tragic as Mr. Floyd's death was. Like Rahm Emanuel, who was, everyone knows he was Barack Obama's right-hand man, his chief of staff, said, never let a good crisis go to waste. This is our opportunity to get the kind of change in this country that we need. White folks are listening, all right? So if they're listening, what are we going to tell them? What kind of change are we going to demand? How are we going to position ourselves in this country to make sure, one, that they understand the plight of African Americans, they do something about it to rectify that in some meaningful and tangible way, but also work toward moving the conversation that helps us all, because that's the only way we're going to get something. And I can go a whole lot longer about this. Obviously, I'm fired up, but I'll yield to the next person. But that's my two cents.
I was gonna say, Representative Pendarvis, you can keep that same energy. I was riled up, so you told us to keep that same energy, so that was good. And I think just pivoting off of what you said, I think even thinking about county and city officials and what that looks like for Black individuals, you know, we don't think that we can even be a part of that when you think of politics. So maybe that's another opportunity where we can have another call where we really talk to people about how they can get into office and how, you know, voting is important. I know we talk about, I mean, you're going out for election next week, but voting in November, and how, I think I just saw on the news, I can't remember what state, but a Black woman won in, what is it? I can't remember, Mayor City? I can't remember. I've been trying to stay out of the news, but she won, and it's because people got out and voted. And so I know we always say vote, 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 but I think this year, if we don't go to vote, then all of this is going to be in vain. I think to your point.
Absolutely. We have to be engaged at the ballot box. We have to. June the 9th if you're in South Carolina, June the 9th again.
Yep. I will be there. Any one of our panelists, if you guys can pivot right off of Representative Pendarvis.
I'll jump in there because I do really appreciate the call to make sure folks vote. One of the issues we have in the Black community is that, and I know this from being on the ground and working on voter registration issues, is that we vote and we're not informed about who we're voting for. Mm-hmm. And so it's very important for us to not only vote, but to do our research and to vote in a candidate that is going to really put Black issues at the forefront. And so what does that mean? You can't just show up for the general election, you have to show up for the primary as well, okay? And you have to know what that candidate stands for. And let me tell you, just because a Black candidate is running does not mean they're deserving of your Black vote, because it does not mean that they have your best interest at hand. And I can tell you that as a resident of Charlotte, North Carolina. So knowing who you're voting for, but also when you go and vote, take 10 people with you. Register 10 other people with you. the guys who are standing on the corner, educate them about getting out to vote and why that's important to them, right? And so if you're going to educate other folks about why it's important to vote, you have to educate yourself, and you have to be able to communicate with folks who you are educating about why it's important to vote. And so what does that mean? That means if you're going to folks in the hood to talk to them about voting, you have to talk to them in their language. Why is it important for you to vote? Because if your cousin, or if your uncle, or if your sister, or if your mother is killed by the police, it's important for you to vote for who the district attorney is going to be, because they determine the charges that are going to be brought against that officer, right? It's important for you to vote for a mayor, because as you can see right now, you have some mayors in the US who are stepping in and holding their officers accountable, and you have some mayors in the US who are not stepping in and holding their officers accountable for using excessive force against protesters and folks who are out expressing themselves peacefully in response to what's going on. So yeah, voting is very important, but you have to know who you're voting for. You have to educate yourself with respect to who's running for the offices, why those offices are important, and then you have to get out there and you have to touch a couple of other folks and be able to break it down to them in their terms, why it's important to vote and why it matters in their particular lives. The other thing I was gonna say, Shell, you hit on earlier, is that, you know, when you think of racism and injustice and inequality and inequities, we really have to understand and embrace that literally touches on every aspect of life, from the food you have access to and the food you eat, the environment you live in and the different pollutions in that environment, voting issues, police brutality, employment, education, healthcare, literally every aspect of life, there is some sort of inequity and some sort of inequality and some sort of injustice. And so what does that mean when we're posing the question, what is it that I can do? Everyone doesn't have to be a state representative to do something. Everyone doesn't have to be a professor to do something. Everyone doesn't have to be a civil rights attorney to do something. Your do something can be specifically catered to your life. Your do something in the Black community can see a young man going astray and take him under your wing and get him on the right track. Your do something can be seeing that, you know, you have city officials riding around a Black neighborhood that's being gentrified and knowing that you have elderly neighbors who live in these homes. So going out of your way to see what you can do to help them keep their homes, to help them stand in place, right? You know, what you can do means, you know, knowing, you know, building relationships with the folks who matter in your community, right? And everyone matters. So that means building relationships with the folks who are on the block, who nobody wants to talk to, who everyone looks down on, because you don't know their story. You don't know what they've been through. You don't know why they're there. You don't know why they're doing what they're doing, right? Every criminal is not a bad person, right? And I use criminal, I don't like that word, but everyone who has committed a crime is not a bad person. Get to know those people. Do what you can to help them. I long for the day that I'm pulled over in my hood, and I live in a historically Black neighborhood here in Charlotte, very intentionally. I long for the day that I see some craziness where, you know, an officer pulls someone over and, you know, they're being too aggressive, because guess what? I'm going to call the captain over at the precinct that's over here, and I'm going to call a lieutenant, and I'm going to call the sheriff and let him know that I'm going to represent this person and he's headed down to the jail. Make sure they take care of him. And it doesn't take a lot to make those relationships. It's being present and on a daily basis, making an effort to make some sort of change. And again, that change, it looks different for everyone. And it can literally be you providing food or helping someone get access to healthcare, or helping someone get a decent job so they can, you know, get meaningful housing options and different things like that. And so, you know, I want everyone to know that in every one of your respective fields, wherever you work, wherever you go to church, wherever you hang out, there's a way for you to be able to use the tools that you're already equipped with to help advance our community. But we have to make sure that we're doing that on a consistent basis, and not just when we see George Floyd, who's laying on the ground with the knee in his neck. And so, you know, people are like, oh, at least I don't hear about Black stuff today. You're gonna hear about Black stuff from me today. And we, you know, because it matters. every single day it matters. And you know, I recognize that folks are very exhausted and tired and angry after seeing the video and you know, knowing about some of the other things that have been going on simultaneously, and I can appreciate that. And I too feel the same, and you should feel that way. But you know, you're exhausted, have your time to cope, and once you're done coping, come up with a strategy to figure out what it is that you can do in your own, you know, capacity to help to continue to advance our Black community on a daily basis.
Wow, you said a whole handful, and I've been trying to like keep up with what you've been saying, but also look at the comments. There's some really good comments about, you know, what website you can use to vote, talking about social service agencies, all of this. But I want to piggyback a little bit off what you said, Alicia, and in terms of, I saw a lot of like rhetoric around like, you know, everybody can't be on the ground, everybody can't be on the front lines, but you can be in the ground in your communities. And so go volunteer. You know, we are all part of, we were in college, we were all part of these organizations that said that, you know, we have to serve the community. Go volunteer at these inner city, at a YMCA. Go volunteer at a Black high school. Go volunteer in these spaces, to what Shannon said, these social service organizations that do not get funding to do anything, but they have to go into these communities and they have to go into these places and educate people. And to your point, we think that we are supposed to understand this stuff, but a lot of people, you know, in our community, we should feel like we are privileged, you know, in a space, in this Black privileged space. We all are able to be a part of this call. There are a lot of our communities who don't have internet access and who don't even know how to get on it. So, you know, we got to start at the beginning and start there. And so to your point, that really hit a soft spot, because when I work in communities with public health, you know, a social determinant of health, and I think somebody said it, is your zip code. It's where you live. These people don't have resources to do anything. You know, one story that I have that kind of, I hate to say it, but it haunts me more than, you know, seeing George Floyd's body on the ground. But we went into this, public health, we work with individuals trying to provide resources for them, you know, in the space. And one young lady, she got diagnosed with diabetes, and her doctor asked her, hey, do you have somewhere to put your, you know, do you have a refrigerator to put your medication in? And she said, yep, I'm good. And, you know, they kept looking at her case and they were like, well, let's send a community health worker. If you're not sure, a community health worker is somebody to go out and, you know, go see what's going on, kind of manage and see what resources they can provide. What happened was they went to her house, they saw the insulin in her refrigerator, but her lights were off. And so it's like these little small things that, you know, we take for granted and that are real, and people are living with that. And so I feel privileged in a sense to be in this space with you all, but I know there's so many people that are hurting. So I know we always want to talk about police brutality, and we're upset, we're mad, but it starts in our community, and we have to go back into those communities and really, really just listen, be a listening ear and learn. And that's the most that I can provide from that. But keep looking in the, you know, the comment boxes, in the chat box, and then we're going to keep going forward, because I think we can just keep talking and talking and talking. So either Dr. Adams or Dr. J.
I'll go. So I have two takeaways. My first takeaway is, you know, to read books that are written by Black authors that focus on the Black experience and Blackness. And I'm not saying that Black people don't read, so I know that we do read, but I think we have to acknowledge that we have to interrogate also what we're reading to and who we're reading. Because so often in school spaces, we read stuff that are written by white people and white authors, and their ideologies influences, you know, the characters, the language we use and see. And it's always like white ways of existing and being and speaking in the world. So, you know, read Black books written by Black authors that focus on Blackness and the Black experience. And so I have a few books that I can share. I gave Shell a list of resources of books. And so like one is, you know, Between the World and Me. That's one book you can take away. Policing Black Lives is another good one. Angela Davis, Freedom is a Constant Struggle is another good one. Brittany Cooper's The Crunk Feminist Collection, which is a dope one. You got Heavy, an American Memoir, and then one of my favorite, Prison Industrial Complex for Beginners. And so just some resources that, you know, you can have to learn about Blackness. And a lot of questions I see on social media from Black folks. I get that we're Black people and we understand because we live in these bodies, but also I feel like a lot of questions that I also learn about Blackness, I get from the books too, when I read the right people. So I just know there's so much knowledge that really, you know, that is in books. And so my last takeaway is actually a closing meditation around like thinking about Black joy and what it means to actually radically imagine the world that we hope to see, that is not yet, but the world that we all demand and the world that we all deserve. And so the closing meditation is, and I'll put it in the chat box for people who want to actually do this activity. So it says, when you imagine a perfect world, what does that perfect world look like? How does it smell? How does it feel? How do joy, radical love, and Black futures fit into your perfect world? Because we have to think about Blackness in the future, and we do exist in the future. And so I just want to end on that note. So those are my 2 takeaways.
Love it, love it. And so we have this real quick before we get to Dr. Adams, we have this list of books that Dr. J created. And so what we're gonna do now, if you are on Instagram, if you can go to the @chooseyouproject.com, and we're still talking, so maybe after this, but if you just list one takeaway or one, practical solution you will apply to your everyday life, we are gonna give away 5 of those books of your choice. And so we will do a giveaway, and if you are selected to win, we will get whatever book it is on that list that he created. We will send you those books. And so and maybe after this, you can definitely, I'll make sure to leave this up or post it on, the Choose True page, but just one takeaway or something practical you're going to take and you're going to hold yourself accountable for, not just on social media, but in life. And we'll send you off those books and do the giveaway probably at the beginning of next week when you get the link for this webinar. So going back to in confidence, and maybe now we are gonna kind of jump into, what we should be doing, especially, around COVID, because COVID is still real, but then jumping into, what are our key takeaways and next steps? And, a lot of the panelists already talked about that, but just, some final words, some final takeaways that you want people to know before we jump into Q&A.
So first and foremost, I really appreciate what everybody has talked about in ways that we can help the community, because I think that's something on a personal level I've been struggling with and trying to figure out and identify the best ways that I can help my community and still like help myself and protect myself at the same time. And the reason I say that is I feel aligned in this fight. Like I feel like it makes me so proud to see people out and protesting and bringing awareness to the issues. But every single time I see somebody up in a crowd and protesting and they have no mask on, and I see droplets going everywhere, I think about the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic, and this pandemic has not really changed in the past month, in the past few months, 3 months, et cetera. And that's kind of why I appreciated, Shell, you bringing me in here to talk about COVID-19 and the center of all this, because right now, George Floyd is at the forefront of all of our minds, as he should be, and as all the other Black people who have died should be. But we still have to be conscientious of the fact that COVID-19 is happening, and COVID-19 is something that disproportionately affects Black people, because we make up a large number of people who are going to be more susceptible to the more severe aspects of the disease. The National Medical Association, which is a collective of African-American physicians, they actually made a statement in April, and they talked about the fact that we're dying at a rate of almost 2 up to 7 times more than our white counterparts. Like here in Chicago, Black people were 7 times more likely to die than white people of COVID, right? And everybody who's spoken before me actually mentioned social determinants of health. And for those people who don't know what these things are, I'll just talk kind of about the 6 broad categories. So you think about economic stability, right? So we have jobs that often don't let us work from home. Like one of the major things that people talked about was working from home. That's one of the major recommendations that has come out of this, is working from home. But if you don't have a job where you can work from home, that's not going to work, right? You still have a higher risk of infection. And then also on top of that, a lot of these jobs don't provide health insurance. So we either in a position where we're underinsured or we're uninsured in the middle of a health crisis, right? And then you look at your physical environment, low income housing, we can't afford to socially isolate at home, right? Like we don't have 3 to 4 story houses and wings and things like that where we can actually go and separate ourselves from everybody else in the household. We have multiple people living with us. We have elderly people living with us. We have people who have major underlying health conditions, heart disease, diabetes, asthma. These are 3 major conditions that put you at a higher risk from having the more severe complications of COVID. And these are conditions that disproportionately affect all Black, not all Black people, but most Black people, right? And so it's important to think about this as you go to protest. And so I guess the next question is going to be, we need to get out there, we need our voices to be heard. So what can I do to protect myself in the setting of all this, right? When you go protest, wear your mask. Don't just wear your mask over your mouth, because at the end of the day, if I sneeze, all those droplets, they go like so, right? I'm being a little dramatic, but it's true. And so say that my mask is doing this and your mask is doing this, you're still inhaling my droplets, right? And so you have to wear a mask. You have to clean your hands. And if you are not in a position where you can go wash your hands immediately, keep them out of your face. Please keep them out of your face. The other thing that's really important is if you are sick, stay at home. Stay at home for yourself, stay at home for the people around you, because at the end of the day, you still have the potential to infect somebody else next to you. And one of my colleagues actually mentioned this, and I didn't even think about it, but when you go to protest and say you go there with 5 of your friends, the 5 of you should stick together, right? The 5 of you should stick together at the protest, and the 5 of you, if you all want to isolate together, you do that. You keep it amongst yourselves so that it's not being spread everywhere else. And the other important part of this is, say that you start to feel like you're sick, right? You start having fevers, you start having cough, shortness of breath, loss of smell, loss of taste. Take your temperature. Don't take your temperature when it's been 30 minutes of you exercising. Say you just finished running, you just finished marching. Don't take it 30 minutes after that. Go home, settle yourself down, then take it. And don't take it after you've taken some Tylenol. And you don't have to automatically go to the emergency room when you start having these symptoms. I think that's something else that has come up consistently. A lot of people have asked me questions about. Call your doctor. And if you don't have a doctor, you can call your local health department, and they have resources, and they can point you in the direction of COVID testing centers, and they can make recommendations over the phone. And the last and very important kind of piece of information I want to give people is that warning signs. So if you notice that you're having trouble breathing, you're having persistent chest pain, you're having chest pressure, you're confused, you're not able to stay awake, you're having trouble with staying awake, you have blue lips or blue face, or if anyone around you has these things, please, in no situations, go to the emergency room. Don't stop. Go straight to the emergency room. And while you're out protesting, while you're out bringing attention and awareness to what's happening in our community right now, be sure you're aware of where you can get healthcare. Be sure that you're aware of, like, if you're at a protest and somebody collapses, or God forbid there's tear gas goes out, or somebody is attacked by the cops, make sure you are aware of the nearby hospital or nearby medic so that you can get assistance, or you can direct somebody, you can help somebody get assistance. So I think those are kind of just my major takeaways. And then in regards to resources, I didn't give Shell like a list of resources, but recommendations right now from the Center of Disease Control, this is where we're going. This is where doctors are going. This is where a lot of healthcare workers are going to get our information. So you can type in COVID in the CDC, and you can click those links, and they can give you recommendations, and they can direct you into the right place. I already mentioned your local health department. If you're ever curious about where we are in COVID and where we are in regards to the death toll or the number of infected cases, Johns Hopkins actually has an excellent website where they've been tracking daily the number of instances, like the number of COVID positive patients that we have. And they've also been tracking the death toll as well. So those are my major takeaways. Please continue to fight the good fight, but please also be conscientious of your health, and be conscientious of the fact that we are still in the middle of a pandemic, and it's a pandemic that we still don't know. We don't know everything about yet, and we don't really know what the long-term effects are going to be yet. So what you can do right now is to protect yourself, protect your grandma, your grandpa, your daughter, your cousin, your friend, your bestie, all that. We got to protect ourselves, because nobody else is going to do it. And that's something that's been quite obvious as of late.
Yes, Dr. Adams, thank you. I was going to say, I know people have been protesting, but we got to make sure, like, if you are living at home like me, you got to protect the people in your house, because we want to, sometimes we think like self, let me do this, but you got to definitely protect the people in your house. Because I've heard situations or instances where people have given it to their grandparents or given it to their parents or people in their house and, not been aware. To any of the other panelists, any last key takeaways, next steps before we open it up for Q&As?
I have a couple of last takeaways.
Okay.
And this was, I've been thinking about what my takeaways would be since we started the call today. And the biggest thing for me is that I want our young Black generation of folks to realize that slavery just was not, that wasn't that long ago. Living in a segregated society wasn't that long ago. Every last person on this call knows someone who had to drink from a separate water fountain, who had to go into a different entrance of a movie theater, or who couldn't go into the store and try on clothes simply because of the color of their skin. I have the privilege of working with seniors through the nonprofit, and I love hearing their stories. But again, it reminds me every day that we haven't come that far as a country for us as a generation of young Black folks to be as comfortable as we are. We cannot continue in comfort. We cannot continue thinking that, you know, we've come so far that we don't have a long way to go, because we do have a long way to go. And I was looking through the comments earlier, and one of my good friends, Brandon Gates, he said, we need to call people out. We absolutely need to call people out. You know, I'm all for calling folks out. And, you know, my friend who's here right now will tell you, I will go into work with the blackest of the blackest shirts, and I'm an attorney. And I was at an all-white firm, and I'll wear my African wraps, and I'll wear my shirts that say Black Power and all this other stuff. Because not only are you correcting folks by calling them out, but you're correcting them by being yourself and embracing your Blackness and not being afraid to be Black. I am a Black attorney, but guess what? I was a Black woman before I ever became an attorney. So yes, I'm absolutely going to wear my African gear if I want to wear it. Yes, I'm absolutely going to be myself. I'm going to put my family members first. I may have to leave work every now and then to do something that you don't have to do because you have the privilege to not have to do that, right? And so calling them out, but really just being yourself and embracing that Blackness. And then the last thing I wanted to say as a final takeaway is when you're doing this type of work, and I am calling on everyone on this call to really jump in action and finish your coping, because you deserve that. But when you're writing your action plan and you're starting to implement that plan, you really have to formulate your beliefs. So if you believe police brutality is wrong, if you believe income inequality is wrong, if you believe in education inequalities and inequities and employment inequalities and all of these things, you take that position. And once you take that position, you have to start to take action based on that position and those beliefs that you formulated. And once you formulate those beliefs and take those actions, you have to stand by those actions and be willing to take whatever the consequences are, right? And so I'm not telling you to go out there and set a police car on fire by any means, but hell, if that's the way you want to express yourself, do what you got to do, right? But what I am saying is take your position and stand by it. And don't be afraid if people don't agree with you. Don't be afraid if people talk bad about you. People talk bad about me every day. People will call me ghetto for doing whatever I want to do. And I'll be the ghetto lawyer. I'll be whatever you want me to be. But guess what? I get out every day. I fight for my people because that's what I believe in. And I stand by every single thing I do. And I don't really care who feels otherwise. So thank you all for joining the call. Shell, thank you so much for creating this space. I really enjoyed it. And I really hope that folks are really encouraged to, move forward with developing their plans to take action with respect to uplifting the Black community.
So real quick question before we go to either Representative Pendarvis or Dr. J. If I decide to set a car on fire in Charleston, can you represent me or anybody on this call? It's like 90 of us on this call. Will you represent us?
I got somebody for you.
Attorney-client privilege. We're not going to talk about this on the call.
Okay. Let's not talk about it on the call. But I just want to make sure.
I'll jump in after Alicia because I got to feed off of that energy of Sister Brown. I'll be honest with you, and I appreciate everything she said because she's right, and I hope everyone takes heed to that. My only takeaway points are this. One, recognize we all have a role in this. I don't know who said it earlier, but we all are in different spaces. We all operate different professions. And in each of those, it creates an opportunity for us to advocate for the movement in some different way. And so just recognize that, embrace it fully, and know that we all aren't, everyone's not called to run for office. Everyone, even the movement in the 60s, you had agitators, you had folks that kind of went up against the system. You have people who were in office, but you need people on the groundwork doing the work. You need people who are policy people. And so we all have a role to play. And so understand it, know it. So that's that point. And then my second point is, and I wrote these down, let's not wait until the next George Floyd for us to really get involved. Feeding off of Sister Brown's point, we all know that these events, these shootings, these deaths continuously happen. It's a systemic problem that's going to take some time to unravel. It's not going to happen overnight. And so let's do what we can to activate ourselves in what capacity we may before the next one happens. This is the opportunity. It's very ripe for it. And so I just hope that we take full advantage. And I'll just lastly end, I saw that Lamar put a book up by Assata Shakur, and so I'll just go with a quote, one of my favorite is, it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and protect each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. And so thank you for the opportunity, and I certainly look forward to the question and answer when it gets here.
Oh, thank you, Representative Pendarvis. Can you send me that quote? Can you email me or text me that quote? That was good. And then Dr. J, Dr. J, did you want to leave us off with anything other than, I think you already had gave us the resources on the book, but did you want to end with anything before we jump in Q&A?
Yeah, I'll just say, just remember that you must love your Blackness as a precondition to humanity. That we can't even be human if you don't love your Blackness. So just remember that.
Okay. Are we in church? We're doing church a little early.
Black space.
Black space, you hear me? So before we jump into questions, I'm gonna try to figure out how to navigate this, but I'm gonna leave this book. So I wasn't clear about what this looks like. So any of those takeaways, I feel like those are a lot of quotes. If you want some quotes, you can go on the Choose Twitter. It's at the Choose PROJ. But for the book giveaways, if you can go on Instagram, I got y'all all over the place today. I got a lot of y'all on here, so we all gonna get all these ads. And so if you go on the Instagram page for the Choose True Project and you write, one takeaway, one quote, one book, anything that you want to put on there, and then we'll do the giveaway and do that next week. But we are going to open this up for Q&A, so let's see how we are going to do this. Does anyone have a question? Or if you, I don't want to say if you have a question to unmute yourself, because that can get tricky. If you have a question, can you just put it in the chat box that you have a question, and then I'll say who can unmute themselves and go it that way, maybe get a little bit order. If anybody has any questions, there were some good comments. Please go back to the comments. I'm going to make sure that I go back. If you guys don't have questions, I think I saw there was a questions about defunding the police, and we always hear defund the police, but like exactly how do you do that? What does that look like, and how does the average American Black person, what do we do to get into that?
I'll take that, yeah, because that's something. I remember. I think Shannon Schultz had brought that up, and Pierre was talking about that too.
Mm-hmm.
That's a conversation that's really gotten a lot more steam recently, which is defunding police departments. I know that there's a big movement in New York for them to defund their police department, and really what it is if you look at the protest, and a lot of it is representative of what the reason that people were protesting before to begin with, which is you've got this over-policing in America. And so much of the police force is militarized. If you look at some of the equipment that they had out there, these tanks, the weapons that they have, oftentimes you wonder is it necessary to maintain the peace to protect our communities? Yeah. Because oftentimes it's more used as a fear tactic, an intimidation tactic. And when you get to this aggressive over-policing that's really been championed by our president, that continues to really harm people and it negatively affects our community, then you have to look at, all right, well, one, how big are these police budgets? And then two, do we need to look at how these budgets are funded, and do we need to scale that back a little bit? That's a tough conversation to have, right? Because a lot of folks don't want to get on the train about defunding police department because of the public service that they serve. But I think the conversation that we will start to have is, it's not about a complete defund, right? We're not trying to zero budget you, but what we want you to understand is there is this over policing. There are some equipment that, there's some equipment that you have that's probably unnecessary. And how do we scale that back to a large degree to ensure that we're not putting, our safety and of our citizens in jeopardy with this over policing that we have.
Yeah. No,
and Shel,
sure.
can I add to that? Because that's something I've been having discussions with some of our elected officials here in Charlotte. And yes, I get the idea of defunding the police, but if we defund the police, you're still going to have police officers who are out there beating the hell out of Black people, who are out there terrorizing Black people. So, the real issue, and probably even more because they're upset that they've been defunded now, right? And the real issue is holding them accountable. When a police officer commits a bad act, who needs to be in place to hold these folks accountable? And the answer is, in many instances, it's folks who we can elect into office, right? It's the district attorney. It's the mayor. Look at Keisha in Atlanta. She's calling the shots out there. Look, these officers who were overly aggressive with these, with the Morehouse and the students, they are fired and charges have been filed against them. And I can guarantee you that's because they have a leader of their city in place. She's a soror, shout out to Keisha Lance Bottoms, but they have a leader in place who is willing to hold officers accountable. So I just wanted to throw it out there. I hear you on defunding the police, but it has to go beyond that as well.
I'm with you on that. I'm definitely with you. Definitely with you on
that. Brandon Gates has a question. You can unmute yourself, Brandon, if you want to talk.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, first I want to say that thank you guys so much for having this forum. It's really cool to see so many of my friends from middle school, high school, and college doing amazing things, and I really appreciate hearing your perspectives. My question is, it's sort of about the police. I know that sometimes there's all these videos that go around that say, oh, this is how you stand your ground when you're going up against the police, you have to know your rights and stuff like that. But it's a lot of conflicting messages, especially when it comes to black and brown people. Police don't always be like, oh yeah, those are your rights, so I'm gonna back off. So what advice or what resources can you guys point to people who are looking to educate themselves on what to do when they're stopped by a police for no reason or whatever, and how can black and brown people just make sure they're safe?
So I guess I'll take the first stab at it. That's a question that's come up a lot, and I imagine it varies. And someone certainly correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not unaware of any national mandate or booklet or recommendations that come down, but I can tell you from what I know personally here in Charleston, which is there are a number of organizations. Our Black Lives Matter, their chapter here. We've got the Urban League, and there are a number of groups that have put together a list of basically what you do if you're stopped by the police officers. In fact, I'm part of the Thurgood Marshall Legal Society, which is a group of Black attorneys here in Charleston. And so there are groups here locally that's done that. I imagine if you go to other cities, you'll see that. I would just encourage you to kind of venture into, and certainly if someone knows of that in your city, drop it in the comment box. But that does exist. I've had conversations with people, in South Carolina, outside of South Carolina, about what happens, because this has happened enough where we've been able to compile data and say, all right, well, let's look at some best practices to kind of educate people on things that need to be done when we're in these situations, because they come up time and time again, and oftentimes people are looking at exactly what has to happen. And so I can only speak for what I know here personally in my backyard, but I would venture to say that the same is true beyond it, and you have to kind of look into the different organizations that exist, the Black organizations, particularly even some of the legal societies that are around your particular city that may be able to speak more on the issues going on there.
Yes, some questions have been coming in the chat box. One, for instance, I saw also if you all are looking for therapy resources, Kiera Walker has been putting a lot of good therapy resources and websites in the chat box, but also I saw a question about, how do you approach a supervisor at work who may have not said a word about what has been going on in the news and keeping my 9 to 5. And I think those are very big, important questions. And I am actually working on, an opportunity for us to talk to somebody at a what is it called? Big company, huge company. I don't know what these things, top 100. I don't know, John. What's it called? I don't know. Forbes, whatever. She works for a big organization and she's diversity and inclusion there. And so having her come on to talk about, what that looks like, because I know a lot of you all have been talking about that. And also an opportunity for us to talk to somebody about digital activism and what that looks like. And that there is actually a word like in scholarly work called slacktivism. And, we all are saying we're doing this work, we're posting. But is that really digital activist? And she will talk about, what that looked like and the hashtag Black Lives Matters, how it started with these 3 Black women. And so I'm be on the lookout for, those spaces where we'll talk about that. But this question is actually for Alicia and Representative Pendarvis. So some of the issues we have been hearing are the unions and the protections that they allow. This includes the accountability and discipline that's allowed, I'm assuming the police officers. Is there any way the community can impact and influence this? Like what can the community do in this space, or is it just about the laws and voting?
So when it comes to unions, there are a lot of protections for police officers, but you have to understand that a union contract does not trump the Fourth Amendment, right? And the Fourth Amendment protects individuals from unreasonable searches and seizures by police officers. So again, as I said earlier, the best way to be able to approach these issues in terms of handling a police officer who has misbehaved or murdered or beat on someone is to have your connections in place beforehand by being in the community so that you can make the calls when these things happen to the folks who can actually hold those officers accountable. Yeah.
Jill, can I jump?
Can I add to that real quick?
Go ahead, Representative Pendarvis, and then Lamar, Dr. Johnson, we'll end it with you.
Yeah, to add to what Sister Brown said, these police unions act as a shield. We saw it here with Michael Slager and Walter Scott, and so part of the movement that you see nationally is we need to work on trying to address these police unions. And so that's one of the things that I would recommend someone do is look at that. But also, we need to be looking at qualified immunity, which some of these police officers have. That's something that needs to be, when you look at the inability for us to go after officers who commit such brazen acts, there's an issue. And a lot of it goes into how they're protected through the unions, but also this qualified immunity component. So just to add a little tidbit to what Sister Brown said.
And then Dr. J.
I just want to say, when we think about police officers, I think it's also bi-directional, right? I think what are they doing? What are they learning while they're in police academy? What does their curriculum look like? Because in the curriculum it actually says, when you see a target, you have to shoot them down. And basically we're seeing as targets, not even human beings. And I think about when I watched CNN, when Darren Wilson talked about Michael Brown, he sat there and said, he saw a monster. So he was already not even human. So we got to think about what are they taking courses on critical race theory? Are they taking courses on community and law? One of the communities don't even belong to, right? You enter the community you're not even a part of. It's very important to know your community. Like you said, read the room. You have to read the community and know the community. Mm-hmm. I think the other reason is we can have, these books, right? Tell us this is what you're supposed to do when the police pull you over, right? I think your parents, they tell us what you need to do. There's stuff online for that, but also I think the main thing is know whiteness, right? How whiteness operate. Most of these police officers are white men, and they're already told as little kids that this is what blackness is from the media, from schools, from their parents, and they take those ideologies with them in their police force, and they're using those things to, kill unarmed Black boys, girls, men, women. So we have to think about what role whiteness plays in this, and what is whiteness, and it always goes unnamed, unchecked and unmarked. And what is the fear that connects to whiteness, right? There's always a fear about blackness, right? From white people. So I think about all these stories, like even Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman said, people like him always get away. It's a fear of blackness. So we have to understand the psychological aspects of whiteness, right? How whiteness operates. I don't want my department chair asking me, you know, are you okay? You keep that shit over there. Like, you need to go to your own family, go to your own wife and kids, and talk to them about white supremacy, right? Talk to them about anti-black racism, because y'all the ones who are engaging in it. So before we can really have true solidarity, you got to do your own work, like sweep around your own front door first, and then come holler at me. So I'll just end it with that.
Okay, come holler at you at the door.
Can I say something really quickly, Shell?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
It was on my mind, but we moved on to the next question. In response to Brandon's question about what to do when you're stopped by a police officer, you know, I always tell my clients, you need to make it home, right? You need to make it home so that you can come to my office and tell me the story so that we can file the lawsuit. So don't, you know, you can be, you know, vigilant, pay attention to the badge number, you know, if he's acting inappropriately. If I get stopped by the cops, and I don't get stopped by the cops often, but I know that if I ever get stopped by the cops, I'm automatically starting to record on my phone, and I'm going to set it down on the chair next to me so that there's some sort of, you know, video of what has occurred. Because some of these officers are just not employing their video cameras. And I know that, you know, through my practice. And so, you know, if I could offer anything, I would say, start your camera phone rolling or whatnot. If he's being overly aggressive, I would rather you be able to talk to me about what happened to you and we come up with a resolution than you not be here. So that's my feedback when it comes to how to deal with an officer who's overly aggressive or who, you know, unlawfully stops you.
Thank you. Any more questions? I think we are getting to what time? Ooh, we almost at 9:30. We already went through question and answers. Any other questions before we end it? I do have the websites for Alicia Brown, her nonprofit that she started. Not only does she do a lot of work with civil rights, but she also has started a nonprofit. Also, you have Marvin Pendarvis, his website, and then the Choose True Project. And just look out for more events, more spaces like this where we can talk and feel, you know, like people are hearing us and we're hearing each other, and we really are taking these actions, because I was lost a couple of days ago and I feel really like invigorated to like go do some more shit, like honestly. So if we don't have any more questions, I'll see y'all at another one of these. Oh, would there be a follow-up meeting? I mean, I guess I will say I am very new to this space and what we create and what you all want. So if you email me spaces that you want to create. Oh, somebody just put in a long, okay, I got it. I just wanted to make sure. I was trying to watch both, but if there's things that you all want to talk about or create spaces more like this, let me know the subject or let me know, and I can kind of think through, you know, who we can have up there. Or if you have people that you are like, Shell, he or she, this person, this group would be good for this space, let me know. I'm feel like I'm going to continue creating these spaces for us to have these conversations, because it's been helpful, and we need more of these spaces where we just talking about us and what the hell we need to get going on and doing. So just email me at any time or DM me, text me. I'm always here to listen. So I think that's it. I think everybody. What? Oh, the paragraph. So make sure you keep the comments. So I'll keep you can definitely, what's it called? Log off, but I'll keep up if you want to enter into the book giveaway, and just look through the comments. There's some really good still comments on here. But I want to end it at 9:30, and I know you all need to go and just get some stuff done. So thank you for being in this space. Thank you to my community, the panelists, the 4 panelists, how you guys jumped on and said, yes, I'll do this. In really short notice, but I felt like we had to have this conversation sooner than later. So thank you all, and I'll see y'all later. I'll see y'all on Instagram.
Thank you, Shell.